Hi, welcome to The Sit-In. I am your host, Martina Barksdale. Here at The Sit-In, you ain't got to get up. Here you belong, here you are seen, here you are heard. On today's episode, we are focused on Black women in politics. Joined with some special guests as well as my friends. We have Sherelle Pierre, she is a political strategist, as well as Martina Jackson, and you are actually a candidate for the 81st District State Representative. Thank you for being with me, ladies.
Thank you.
All right, let's just jump right into it.
Sure.
What's been your biggest challenge being not only a woman in politics, but a Black woman in politics?
Well, I will start. So I've been in politics actively full-time since 2016. And honestly, I was very calculated about how I wanted to enter the field. And so I can't say my biggest challenge is because I've tried to use being a Black woman to my advantage in every possible situation. I think one of the biggest things is there aren't that many of us actively engaged in politics. And if they are folks who are running, and maybe not people who are behind the scenes running campaigns, raising money, so on and so forth. So it's kind of cool to be a little bit of a unicorn. There aren't that many, but I think some of the challenges are navigating rooms where you're the only one, navigating spaces where you're the only one, navigating positions where no one who has ever looked like you who's done it before. So I think one of the things you have to bring to the table is working twice as hard, always being on it. But again, those challenges aren't unique to politics. They're just par for the course of being a Black woman, right?
I would echo what Sherelle is saying, is that there aren't many folks in the room that look like me, and so I use that as an advantage because we should be at the table. We should be part of the decision making, and I find that a power or a sense of power. It is a power, right? It's a sense of empowerment too. That I am going to be here, and I'm going to speak for the voices that aren't here, and so those are challenges or unique situations, but I find them also an opportunity to really open a door that sometimes we don't always get to. So that's probably been my take on how I maneuver through politics. I've always been kind of, like Sherelle said, behind the scenes of helping people run their campaigns, and but I've always had the want to go into public service and have done it before. So.
Right. And I know you all have both been behind the scenes, and you're actually stepping out and running for office. What helped you make that decision?
Well, I knew in the back of my mind I would want to run for something. I didn't know what it would look like. I've always been about giving my community a platform wherever I am. And I knew that the race was coming up in my community in District 81. And so we didn't have anyone to run on the Democratic ticket. And I said, well, I don't really have a reason not to run.
Right.
So I made that decision, and I talked with my 7-year-old. I said, what do you think about me doing a campaign? He was like, do we get signs? I said, yes, we do.
That's all it takes.
And so that's all it took. He said, okay. I said, let's roll.
That's amazing. So, and what about you? What made you want to get involved in politics?
Oh my gosh. True story. So I've been involved in politics, interested in politics, rather, since I was 7.
Yes. I believe it.
Nerding out. That was the time when the Gulf War was happening, and seeing on TV every night pictures, really dark, like missiles and bombs and things going. And then the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather would always show folks who had died that same day or that same week. And I remember a lot of them weren't much older than me. So I'm 7, they're 18, 19, 20, and I'm thinking, what's the cause of all of this? And politics. And so I became really engaged in politics. Fast forward to 14, 15, and I said, I have to do this. This is what I want to do. I made a quick pit stop over into the journalism world. And then when I knew I'd done all I could do there in 2016, I decided to make the switch. But for me, right now I'm working on my PhD in politics. And there's this really simple definition that says that politics is who gets what, when, and how. And if you are not actively engaged in what, when, and how, you'll be left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel it's really important for me, as Martina said, to speaking for voices who might not be at the table and who don't even know where to find a table, right? And so that's important for me.
What do you say to people, because a lot of times, you know, I'm involved in politics, not on the level you all are on, but, you know, I try to do my part, and I was working with the People's Campaign, and we campaigned right here in the East End area, and then we got a lot of people registered to vote, and a lot of people were interested, but you still get those people that, hey, my vote doesn't count, it doesn't affect me, we can't be the change, it doesn't matter, we're outnumbered to a sense. What do you say to the people that just feel like their life is okay without politics and it doesn't affect them?
Well, I say politics affects you whether you're involved or not.
Right.
It's like one of those things, and you know, I say one of the greatest tricks that the devil has is making people believe he doesn't exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the greatest tricks I think that politicians have is making you think that you don't have a voice.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying politicians are the devil, just putting that in this language. But I will say that economics, business, your roads, your schools, what kind of services you're getting, all of that's going to affect you.
Mm-hmm.
So you can either let somebody else push it onto you, or you can have a voice.
Right.
And to add on to that, so growing up, I grew up in public housing. I also came from a very conservative Christian background where, because of my mother's faith, she did not participate in voting.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but having grown up in also after school programs where it was Girls Incorporated, where you talk about being strong, smart, and bold.
Mm-hmm.
And I took that with me to college. And I registered to vote as soon as I turned 18 because I was used to not having a voice. And I was tired of not having a voice either because I knew living in public housing, a lot of folks were like, you know, we're just here, we exist, we don't matter. And the fact is, you do matter. You make this community what it is, regardless of where you live. And so that was kind of my push into helping people say, hey, I've been through this, you know, I look like you. Let's, you know, we have a space, let's use it. And showing them and always reaching back to bring them along to show that you are part of this process has been a huge thing for me to make sure you matter.
I'd like to add one point to that because it's really pertinent now. So the U.S. Census is coming up in 2020.
Yes.
It is.
And
They're hired too, just so.
and just to show people that they matter, there are, unfortunately, this is under the hood in politics, there are nefarious forces that are actively working to make sure that Black and brown people are afraid to take the census, are not taking the census, and are not being counted. And that's because simply existing, simply living, simply occupying a space gives you political power. By being counted, resources, money, power is being allocated your way. And so I think that's just a pertinent reminder there. You're not even voting, you simply existing is political power.
Exactly.
And there are people who don't even want you to be counted because of that power.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to her point, make sure with the upcoming census, you fill it out, you fill out the information.
Yes.
And then also for people that might be afraid, it does not have to do with citizenship status. They cannot ask that question, but make sure you're being counted, like she said, so resources can be allocated to our communities to help us build. And I know you said with us just filling up space, there's sometimes a threat. And we've seen in our fight for Black and brown people that people will go through great extremes for our voices to be needed. What are some of your fears, especially being in the political arena? Because I'm fearful sometimes of even speaking out, and I do it because I know I should do it, but what are some of your personal fears with coming into this space?
I'll start.
Yeah.
I think my biggest fear is not that, you know, being in the space is that if I'm not there, someone will not be heard. And that is, you know, a bigger fear than, you know, someone being threatened just because I'm there. You know, I'm okay with stepping up in that space, and we have to take ownership of it too. We can't let people challenge us and push us to the wayside, and it's important that, that's why I'm running, is to challenge that status quo of those fears, because we deserve to be there.
Ooh, this is a tough
I
one.
know. Getting a little spicy.
I'm gonna get down.
Right.
I'm one of those people who I actively work to reject fear in my life. But I think one of the things I didn't know to be afraid of was being misunderstood, even in the African American community. And so I think many times, because there are so few people of color working in politics, you get two reactions. You get people who are so proud of you. Oh my gosh, keep going, keep doing it. Like little people's grandmas giving you hugs and everything. I mean, that's beautiful. But then I think there's this other part, because you are, as I say, a unicorner, because you are a loner in a very, what you would call, white-dominated field. There's an assumption that you do not care about the plight of Black and brown people. And that's something that I didn't even know to be afraid of. I have lived my life with all kinds of people, but I'm very clear on who I am, and I'm very clear on what's important to me. And I actively received attacks from people in the African American community who didn't know me, but assumed because I've been in a position of power that I had somehow compromised myself to get there.
You get that Uncle Tom label
Yes,
sometimes
yes.
in our community, because they don't necessarily, some people just want you to be the bad guy, and then some people understand. I understand that when you're in those positions, because I talk to you about this, is that you hire us.
Yes.
You make sure we're taken care of.
Yes.
So it's about kind of networking across and bringing up people along with you. Just because, you might have a seat at the table before me does not mean that you're not bringing me along and having a chair right next to you.
Exactly. And so in my PhD studies, that's one of the things that, one of my research agendas that I'm working on. I think so much we assume, because of how we've been traditionally marginalized in the political process, that if we're not marching, if we're not carrying a sign, if we're not engaging in some sort of civil disobedience, then we're not effective. And we are finding ways to politic as the mainstream does, and they're more effective. They are less castigated, I think. And I think that we have to all train up. We need people in the streets, but we also need people in the halls of power. And I think that's a transition we have to make in our minds. We can't always be outside yelling in. We've got to be inside making changes too. We all have to work together to do it.
And to that point, I've always been on the policy side, state level work, and that's where I feel comfortable at, because I know there are other people who do the organizing, the marches better than I do, and so I use them as an ally as they can use me as an ally. I spent time at the Justice and Public Safety Cabinet, so criminal justice is a huge issue that's important to me, and I was able to do that on a policy side, where I know women of color, Black women, LGBTQ, those communities are heavily impacted by domestic violence, sexual assault, things like that. And so again, working back to saying, we need people in those positions just as much as we need people out in marches as well.
Right. And I think, sometimes Kentucky gets a bad rap for not being progressive, but I want you all to know these two women, and there's a lot of people out there working for the progression of Kentucky. And I'm gonna be honest, when I moved back from New York City, I was in this small, very liberal bubble. It's a big city, but very small as far as, it's a lot of different people. What are some improvements that have been made and you see being made right here in Kentucky based in politics?
I'll let you want to grab that one since you're going in to make some new laws?
Right.
I would say the biggest thing right now for Kentucky is that we are trying to make movement on addressing the opioid epidemic. And I think Kentucky can be a leader on that, just because we have seen it ravage communities. And even before the opioid epidemic, I know a lot of times the issue of where was, policymakers when crack cocaine, that epidemic came. But if we can remember what that did to our community and what it's doing to our community now, I feel like we can be movers and shakers on that issue. I know that our policymakers are wanting to move that way, and that's something that I think we can be the leader on, and we're trying to be as well. So I'm hoping to see that in the near future for Kentucky.
I think the restoration of felon voter rights is something that we're making movement on, and I think it's a good thing. We know from the study of politics across the board that anytime you're bringing more people into the arena, that is a good thing, and some folks might say it's a good thing for one party or the other, but I think if you've served your time, you deserve to have your voting rights as a citizen restored. Another thing I would personally like to see, I'm not working on it, but I hope somebody listens to this season. I believe that maternity and paternity leave are something that are particularly important. Most of the modern countries and civilizations around the world already afford this to both moms and dads. And I think it's something especially to be extended to dads so that moms don't have to engage in all of the emotional and physical labor with raising a newborn. So that's something I would definitely like to see movement on.
I would like to see that too, because my friend, she had a baby and had to go back in like 4 weeks, and I'm like, what? I'm talking to my other friend in London, and they get off a whole year for, most companies do like that. But are there any last words that you would like to leave us with on this sit-in?
I know what you better say.
Yeah, you better say it. Go ahead and plug yourself.
All right.
Shameless plug.
So, one, thank you for inviting me here. I really appreciate just being able to have this conversation and talk about things that are important to our community, but also Kentucky, because it's if it impacts us, it's impacting everybody.
Exactly.
But yeah, I'm running for state representative for the 81st district, and I've got a primary coming up in May 2020. And so in January, I'm hitting the pavement pretty hard. I'll be knocking on a lot of doors and saying hello to more community members because I'm already out there. I've got a young child, so we're always up and running doing something. But I'm looking forward to addressing criminal justice issues, our health care, public education, and as well as how can we generate revenue for Kentucky? Because let's be real, our state needs it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think my parting thought is to actively seek out folks like Martina who are running. Actively seek out an issue that you can get involved, whether it's your school board, whether it's a candidate that you can give a few dollars to. We all have to become more actively engaged. And it doesn't mean you have to write a piece of legislation or do a march. Just do whatever you can do. Because again, you want to be engaged in that. Who gets what, when, and how, where, why, all of it.
All the
You want to be engaged in all of it. Don't let someone act upon you, act for yourself.
Yeah, that is some great words. Don't let somebody act upon you. Act for yourself. Thank you for sitting down with us. This has been Sherelle Roberts Pierre and Martina Jackson. You know she's amazing because her name's Martina, just like me. No, but I appreciate you sitting in at the sit-in where you ain't gotta get up. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Perry Ab, where we shoot the show. Thank you to the owner, Maya. I want to give you a special shout out. I appreciate all the support. Tune into the sit-in where here you belong, here you are seen, and here you are heard. This has been the sit-in.